Buddha is not a god, but awakening. If Buddha is not a god, then who is he? If you are looking for a deity to save you, you may have already misunderstood the Buddha from the very beginning. For thousands of years, millions have bowed before his image, lit candles, filled the air with incense smoke, and whispered prayers in silence. But have you ever paused to ask yourself who you are really praying to? Is he an almighty being seated in a lofty realm to judge and grant blessings? Or was he once a human who walked barefoot through a world of suffering just as you do now? Buddhism, contrary to many misconceptions, was never a faith founded on blind belief, and the Buddha never demanded that anyone worship him. He promised no paradise, asked for no sacrifices, bestowed no favors. All he did was point the way, one path leading from ignorance to awakening, from attachment to freedom, from delusion to the clear vision of oneself. Yet society's need to venerate has draped him in the robes of divinity. We have transformed a fully awakened being into an object of worship. We erred, and perhaps because we misunderstood the Buddha's true nature, we continue to stray in our pursuit of happiness. So who is the Buddha really? Why did he never claim to be a god? And what might happen if we ceased idolizing him and instead began to practice? This is not merely an exercise in dismantling prejudice, but a return to truth, to authenticity, and to ourselves. Join me in awakening the mind, embarking on the journey to discover what the world has so long misunderstood about one person. Who was the Buddha? A human, not a god. His name lies beyond religious myth and legend. He was neither born from miraculous light nor sent down from heaven to redeem humanity. He was a human being born into luxury, raised in privilege. Siddhartha Gautama, the prince of Kapilavastu, lived amid every worldly comfort, yet carried within him a void, a restless yearning that no amount of opulence could fill. Until one day he walked beyond the palace gates and, for the first time, truly saw what we all encounter each day without ever really seeing: old age, illness, death. He renounced everything in search of truth. That moment sliced through the veil of ignorance, and he could not turn back. No throne, no wife, no child, no palace. Only a burning question remained: how to transcend suffering. This was not the journey of a divine savior, but that of a human confronting his own darkness. 6 years of asceticism followed, starving until only skin clung to bone, so gaunt that touching his belly felt like touching his spine. He endured extremes and realized that extremes do not liberate. Then beneath the Bodhi tree he let go of every technique, sat down and vowed that even if his flesh and bones shattered, he would not rise until he had perceived the truth. He did not beseech the gods for guidance, expect miracles, or beg for salvation. He simply observed, saw clearly, and awakened. In that instant, a human became a Buddha, an awakened one. He did not become enlightened through another's power, but by overcoming himself. Ironically, this most authentic truth is the most misunderstood, for society prefers to revere a god rather than learn to live as one who has awakened. By miscasting a human as a deity, we lose the chance to understand ourselves rightly. But why is this misunderstanding so widespread? What leads us to confuse an awakened being with an almighty God? Let us delve into the workings of the human mind to uncover the root of this illusion. Why do so many mistake the Buddha for a divine granter of blessings? The human mind always craves a supreme being, an invisible shoulder to lean on, some omnipotent force that will hear our prayers and intervene in our fate. Thus, when confronted by the image of one who has realized liberation and transcended suffering, we readily confer upon him supernatural status. We do not want to see the Buddha as a human, for if he is human, then we must face an uncomfortable truth. We too could awaken, yet we refuse to practice. Worshipping a god is easier than meditating for ourselves. Pleading for salvation is easier than confronting our own hearts in silence. Believing in miracles is easier than training mindfulness in every breath and every step. Over time, incense and ritual eclipse the light of genuine practice. We bow before his statue, but do not sit as he did. We recite his words, but do not live by them. We long for the path of liberation, yet never place foot upon it. This misunderstanding arises not from critics of Buddhism, but from the complacency of those who venerate him. Deep down, we still wish someone else would bear our suffering, shoulder our burdens, and bestow luck upon us. But the Buddha never promised to do that. He came to awaken our inner strength, a power no deity can substitute. To grasp this fully, recall a silent yet profound moment in the Buddha's life, a gesture more moving than any sermon, transcending all language. A single flower, a gentle smile, and the silent transmission of awakening directly from master to disciple. The flower and the smile, transmission beyond words. No sermon, no doctrine, no sacred texts, just the Buddha holding aloft a single flower before the assembly. 100 disciples fell silent. None understood, none dared speak. Only the monk Mahakassapa offered a faint smile. In that instant, without words or letters, the Buddha entrusted him with the treasury of the Dharma, the storehouse of truth beyond all speech. This was not a ritual, not a miracle. It was a direct seeing, an insight beyond thought, beyond concept, beyond the self that seeks. Ultimate truth cannot be handed down in words. It can only be revealed when the mind becomes clear, calm, and free of grasping. The story of the flower and the smile is not a legend to exalt the Buddha's supernatural power, but a reminder: all truth is already present. Only those who truly see can understand. This is the essence of Zen, of awakening, of perception unclouded by language and illusion. It also explains why Buddhism, especially Zen, does not teach faith in the Buddha but direct realization as he did. You need not understand everything intellectually. You need only see, really see, that nothing needs to be added to you for you to be complete. You need only quiet yourself, peel away each layer of illusion, each identity, each fantasy, to return to the pure nature you already are. Because what you seek does not lie outside, does not come from a deity or from prayer. It lives deep within you, where silence dwells, where simplicity is found, where Mahakassapa's smile has always awaited recognition. The Buddha did not teach a system of beliefs, but showed a way of life, a way of seeing, a freedom no one can grant you except yourself. Thus, the deepest understanding is not what divine powers the Buddha possessed, but how he lived, what he saw, and what he taught, so that you might step out of suffering on your own. We must return to the fundamental question: is the Buddha a bestower of blessings, or simply the guide who points the path you must walk yourself? To answer, begin by living the truth everyone seems to know, but so few actually practice. The Buddha does not grant blessings, he points the way. The Buddha does not grant blessings, he points the way. He never said, "Believe in me and you will be saved." He said only, "Come and see." The Buddha never claimed to be an almighty, never asserted the power to bless or curse. He did not teach begging, but taught watching. He did not promise a heaven after death, but taught ending suffering in each present moment. To the Buddha, awakening is not a gift bestowed, but the result of deep, continuous practice and mindfulness. One who sows seeds of wisdom will harvest wisdom. One who lives mindfully will gradually transcend suffering, not through intervention by a supreme power, but by how one lives, thinks, and sees. He never mapped out a mystical road to the heavens. He laid bare the path of clear seeing, beginning with this life, this mind. When someone suffers, he did not counsel prostration, prayers, or offerings. He taught them to observe the causes of suffering. He helped them see that suffering does not arise from the external world, but from ignorance, craving, and anger within. The Buddha's Dharma is not for blind faith, but for direct experience. Like a skilled physician, he prescribes remedies for each illness, but whether the patient takes the medicine is their choice. This is what makes Buddhism so extraordinarily unique. He does not need your worship. He only asks you to walk the path yourself. That freedom is both a profound gift and a deep responsibility, because there is no one to blame, no one to bear your karmic debt, no one to take responsibility for the path you choose. You create karma and must bear its fruits. You also can let go of every cause that leads to suffering. He is merely the one who holds the lamp to illuminate a stretch of the road. Yet no matter how bright the lamp, if you keep your eyes shut and refuse to step forward, no one can awaken you in your place. The question is no longer, will the Buddha save me? But am I walking the path he showed? We must re-examine our relationship with the Buddha. Is it truly that of a student to a teacher, or merely that of a suffering person to a monument of hope. To live in the spirit of his teaching, we must distinguish clearly between worship and practice, because the line between them is thinner than you think. Worship versus practice. Worship is when you kneel, join your hands, offer incense, and recite sutras while your heart remains full of anger, craving, and ignorance. Practice is when you sit in silence, observe a rising wave of anger, and choose not to let it govern your words or actions. Worship is going to the temple each Lunar New Year for blessings of safety. Practice is living each day mindfully so as not to sow seeds of unrest. Worship may bring a momentary sense of peace, but only practice can uproot suffering that accumulates day by day. Buddhism never opposes ceremony, offerings, or chanting, yet the Buddha taught clearly, without morality, concentration, and wisdom, all external form is hollow. You may memorize the entire Tripitaka and still suffer. You may prostrate until your knees grow calloused and still be swayed by a single harsh word. Transformation does not lie in outer acts, but in clear seeing. Seeing each thought as it arises, seeing each automatic reaction, seeing where attachment, anger, or fear still cling within. That is practice. That is living the Dharma. That is what the Buddha devoted his life to teaching. You may light incense before the statue hundreds of times, but if you do not turn the light inward, it cannot illuminate your life. People ask, does the Buddha's grace work? A better question is, do you truly live as he taught? If you live with mindfulness and compassion, harming neither yourself nor others, then the Dharma is alive in your life. If you live with resentment, envy, clinging, and supplication, then however many times you utter his name, your path remains shrouded. Therefore, if you truly revere the Buddha, live as he did. If you truly honor awakening, step forward in mindfulness. A miracle will occur. You will no longer see the Buddha as an external icon, but perceive him in every breath, every thought, every action as you live in accord with the true Dharma. But how can we live amid this chaotic world without losing the Buddhist spirit? How can we maintain an awakened nature without becoming rigid or detached from reality? We must return to the deepest core of Buddhism, not the negation of belief, but the transcending of all form, including belief itself. Buddhism does not deny faith, it transcends it. Buddhism never denies humanity's need for the sacred, it only teaches not to stop there. Faith, without wisdom, easily becomes blind reliance. Yet wisdom, without the spark of initial faith to catalyze it, rarely finds fertile ground. Buddhism does not control belief in deities, nor does it encourage clinging to them as an escape. Rather than placing all hope in a supernatural hand, the Buddha invites you to look inward and realize that these very hands, this very mind, determine the course of your life. He did not condemn other religions or denounce ancient beliefs. He simply offered this plain counsel. If a practice makes you less angry, less greedy, less deluded, then continue with it. If it brings you suffering, division, or rigidity, then observe it again. That is the spirit of openness and clarity at the heart of Buddhism. For more than 25 centuries, Buddhism has coexisted harmoniously with hundreds of cultural and religious systems, never seeking to impose, seize, or judge. Yet this very tolerance sometimes leads people to mistake Buddhism for yet another faith system, a place of gods, miracles, and guaranteed salvation. In reality, Buddhism does not send you on a quest for a supreme being. It sends you on a quest to find yourself. It does not point outward to supplicate, but inward to see clearly. This was a silent revolution in humanity's spiritual history, the first religion whose founder never claimed divine birth, never demanded worship, never erected a sacred power hierarchy, but simply asked, why do we suffer, and how can we end suffering? He never required you to believe in him, only to try his practice, to investigate, and to verify for yourself. If you find it reduces your suffering, then continue. No label of Buddhist, no vow of discipleship required. You only need to become awakened. The ultimate aim of any true spiritual path is not to create followers, but to awaken human beings. This brings us to a truth many forget amid countless rituals and traditional methods. Buddhism does not urge you to worship the Buddha, but to live as someone who is awakened. Awakening is not worship, but return. Awakening is not some metaphysical state beyond reach, reserved only for hermit masters in deep forests or remote mountains. According to the Buddha, awakening is returning to live fully in each moment of your own life. When you wash the dishes, you are aware that you are washing dishes, rather than thinking about yesterday's conflict or tomorrow's plan. When anger arises, you neither suppress it nor surrender to it, but observe it silently, as if watching a cloud float by a window. That is awakening. No embellishment, no idealization, no escape from life. Thus, Buddhism is not a journey upward, but a journey home. Home to the simplicity, the stillness, the authenticity of the heart. Home to the place where you need not play any role or wish for anything, but simply be fully present. The Buddha never invited anyone to ascend onto an altar. He invited them to sit down, breathe, observe, and recognize themselves. He did not bestow supernatural power, save souls, or erase karma. He simply said, "This is the truth, and if you live and see that truth, you will be free, free from suffering, free from unconscious patterns, free from the endless cycle of craving, anger, and ignorance." He did not hand you a dogma. He held up a mirror so that you could see your own face. And if you have the courage to look deeply, you will no longer need to pray for anything, because you will see that you are already complete in your awakened nature. Therefore, it is not about some lofty goal. It is simply seeing clearly without evasion, living without being dragged by impulses, loving without possessiveness, acting without clinging to results. And when that happens, you no longer seek the Buddha outside yourself, for awakening begins to live through your eyes, through your breath, through every simple action you perform each day. Soon you will understand why the Buddha smiled, because he knew you needed nothing more to awaken. You only needed to remember what you had forgotten. So the question is no longer, do you believe in the Buddha? But are you willing to live as one who is awake? In the end, the Buddha is not an object of worship. He is an invitation to wake from the dream of ignorance and return to yourself. Once you realize this, your journey becomes less a search outside and more a deep, silent return, full of gratitude to the teacher who pointed the way. Conclusion: you need nothing more to become yourself. The greatness of the Buddha does not lie in supernatural power, nor in being worshipped, but in having chosen a path each of us is quietly beginning, the journey back to ourselves. He did not invite us to revere him like a saint. He simply placed his hand upon the heart of humanity and said, "Here is where you begin." The Buddha does not need your worship. He needs your awareness. Awareness in every breath, awareness in every surge of anger, awareness in every seemingly small choice that shapes your destiny. And if you are listening to these words, perhaps something within you has already begun to shift, an urge, a ripple, a very real sense that you have strayed far from yourself for too long. Let this video be a gentle yet firm reminder that you need go nowhere to find awakening. You only need to return and see that everything you once sought has always been within you. If anything in this video touches your heart, do not keep it to yourself. Share your experience in the comments. A single honest reflection can be the light that helps someone else begin to awaken. Thank you for staying until the very end with both your attention and openness, for your full presence is itself a step on the path home.